This is an ESPN League of Legends program. You got Arda, Tyler, Emily, and Jacob with you. We are live every single Monday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This is our 10th show. We have reached double digits. Congratulations to us. Pats on the back for us.
Pats on the back. Pats on the back, except for the fact that it's not a month. Your fatherhood has destroyed your schedule. I get it.
That's right. But consistency
It's okay,
is
Arda.
key.
I never know what day it is.
That's right. It's not Monday. Used to be Monday. Now it's Tuesday. Tuesday. Yes, I'm a new dad. Doesn't matter. What's also happening right now, by the way, is FlyQuest versus Golden Guardians. We are monitoring that. We will give you instant analysis as soon as that is over. It is currently 2-0 FlyQuest in the series, but keep it locked here. Do a double screen experience. Keep the sound on with us. Go to a second screen, have that on so you can see instant analysis from us as soon as that game is over. We have a lot to talk about. There is a lot of news that has dropped around the world in League of Legends competitive this past week. We have to start with Dignitas announcing that Huni, the $2.3 million man, is available to look at other options for the summer. Jacob, you reported on this. We gave a lot of opinions on this. Did you ever think that we would be in a position that the playoffs are not even over in the LCS and already the relationship between Huni and Dignitas has dissolved into this?
It's crazy, right? The couple months ago during free agency, it sold off Vulcan's contract to Cloud9 for the $1.5 million, and it looked like they were going all in on, as he told Tyler and Daniel on opening weekend. It's seemed like they were really sort of keyed in on focusing on him, and now here we sit less than a split later, and it seems like it was a terrible investment. I think that I got a lot of questions after some tweets regarding Michael Prindiville, the CEO of Dignitas, saying that the money wasn't guaranteed. Just to be clear, we reported that the money deal or the money figure before all the contract terms were finalized, and that they were working towards finishing up that. I do not believe that the salary changed. As I understand, it was $2.3 million across the 2 years, with 1.1 first year and 1.2 second year. Whether they made the entirety of it guaranteed to be determined, but they certainly did make the first year. And so they're going to be out of pocket if he does transfer teams. They're going to be out of pocket at least $500,000.
So
which is
when
a
you
lot
say
of
guaranteed,
money.
just to interject here, when you say guaranteed, that means that Huni is entitled to the entire $2.3 million?
Right. So what got guaranteed is I think it changed, but I think that his first part of that, the first year of that, the $1.1 million is the guaranteed portion of the 2-year deal.
Okay.
And so he is going to be paid out for the remainder of the season, no matter what. And I would say that is I still think, right? Like, I still don't think they're going to be able to move because of what's happened with the schedule, because of coronavirus and how they've changed around dates for the summer split. They realistically have 2 to 3 weeks to move his contract once the playoffs are over. And I don't think there's anyone that wants to take on, and we could speculate and spitball here as much as we want. I've talked to a lot of teams around the LCS over the past weekend since this was announced. I don't know anybody who wants to take on another at least $500,000 to $600,000 worth of liabilities just for this year alone. Plus, that doesn't include buyout, because they'd had to buy out that contract, right?
Right.
So, yeah. There's many different ways this could go. There could be a team that goes, hey, Dignitas, we're going to pay you a buyout. And it could be that the buyout, if the buyout is scaled, it depends on the contract language, but if the buyout is scaled based on salary, that buyout's going to be enormous. That's going to be like at least like $500,000, $600,000 buyout, if not more, depending if you're buying out the entirety of the 2-year, $2.3 million contract, right? And you're reassigning that to someone. So we're talking a ton of money up front, much less by actually paying the salary, which is just for this year. I mean, do the math, right? So the salary is November to November, and it's $1.1 million. How much of that's already been paid? Probably about what that's like 5 months, a little bit under half the year, probably about $500,000 of that's already been paid for this year, and you've got to pay the remaining like $500,000 to $600,000 owed left on just this year alone. We're talking like $1 million+ acquisition in a time where there's a bunch of esports teams scaling back. I actually think that there are layoffs coming because of coronavirus, because people's incomes in other games is prize money, etc. Advertisers can't spend as much because they're having to make cutbacks, right? There's a ton of stuff happening right now that is going to hurt the economics of esports right now because of just the global pandemic of the coronavirus. And it's in a 2 to 3 week transition. It's a huge ask to take on that much money, to pay that much money in a short period of time of uncertainty in the world right now.
Emily, is there any team in the LCS that would even want Huni at this point?
Well, so there are two things. There are two like big takes I have on this. One, this is something that I know Travis Gafford brought up, but other people have also brought up, and I'm sure Jacob already knows. It's Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. They were trying to lay off people, and there was a big backlash, and they hired them back. But the end result is like their parent company.
Emily, just 1 second. Harris Blitzer also owns the New Jersey Devils and Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah.
In the NBA and NHL.
So, like because they aren't playing, like nothing's going on except for esports. Esports is still going to be affected, especially if a major parent company has a lot of traditional sports investments. So that is one thing. Will a team want to pick up Huni? So I've also been talking to teams about what this offseason is going to look like, because it's also really short. And this is something I brought up last show, is that there's only 3 weeks between finals and the start of summer because of the way the scheduling has worked out. In that like conversation, I was talking about the fact that a lot of pro players who are not from the United States might not be able to go home for a really long time. Right. In this case, it also means that teams are going to have a really short window to even shuffle around players. And you also have a bunch of players who are already stuck in the United States because of LCS. So it's like a very weird offseason. I don't see a lot of teams making huge moves. I don't see a team that's willing to pick up Huni's contract for economic reasons, and also just because like it's such a short amount of time that you're going to be not playing to playing again. And that's a really narrow window to integrate someone like Huni on your team, who I actually am about to defend here, because I don't think Huni is a bad player, but I do think he is the type of player that needs a very specific team identity to play with. And because he is that type of player, because he himself as an individual has such a really specific play style and way that he wants to play, and that has not changed, which I think makes him look really, really good at times and also makes him look really, really bad at times. I think that is just by nature, a player like that is also additionally more difficult to integrate into an existing team and system.
So Tyler, how much of Dignitas's challenges and ultimately not making the playoffs this split, how much of that do you put on Huni and how much of that do you put on the rest of the team?
They kind of go hand in hand, right? I mean, as you know, Emily and Jacob both allude to, when Huni's on a team, he's a lot of the times the focus of the team. Like Huni himself called it Hunitas. There's a reason why this is not a new thing in esports, especially in League of Legends. I think we're seeing this new kind of wave coming in where I think each franchise is kind of picking one player and kind of building around that guy as the franchise player. We see it with TSM, with Bjergsen. They gave him co-ownership, building around him. He's going to be there for the next 3 to 5 years. That's his team. We saw it with Gen G of Ruler, very similar thing where they're building around him, gave him a long-term contract, basically told Ruler, this is your team, you're the driver. We saw it with Faker of T1. While it's been his team for, since 2013, it officially became his team this year with the part ownership. And I think of Dignitas, I really do think they saw Huni as very charismatic, very marketable, and a very skilled player who still has, I think 2 to 3 to 4 years of prime left. He's still a very young player. I think people forget how young he really is. And they really looked at Huni as, this guy could be our franchise. We can build our entire franchise about this Huni guy. He's marketable. He's funny. He's charismatic. He's skilled. He's flashy. And I think Huni, in this relationship, we're seeing the downside of trusting in who your franchise player is. with Ruler, Fakir, Bjergsen, it's probably going to work out. Those players have won championships as, main guys on the team. I mean, Faker and Ruler have both won World's MVPs. Huni, on the otherwise, I think Dignitas were a little bit too eager to kind of make him the franchise player, and now we're left in the situation where they have a bloated contract, a player who you need to build around to make him work, and not a lot of time to sell off this contract in a global pandemic. So it could not be worse for Dignitas right now.
So 2 points I want to add to that. Sorry,
Right.
Arda. So first point is that Tyler's right. I asked Michael Prindeville about this a couple of months ago when I was working on the Vulcan piece that we ultimately put out about sort of the Vulcan transfer. I asked him how important was it that he build a team of influencers in League of Legends, simultaneous, competitive players who are also high profile and influencers. If you remember, right, like Dignitas was this humongous brand. If you think about their history, they were a humongous brand in League of Legends, probably the second or third most popular team in North America back in the heyday. They had Scara and I'm a Cutie Pie. They had these guys that were super popular on stream, still are, but no longer a part of Dig. And you see that what happened to them, they were relegated. And then they came back by being they were relegated and sort of fell out of League of Legends. They came back by merging with Apex and being acquired by Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. They had a little bit of a run, but they weren't particularly popular nor very good. They were okay. And then they got kicked out of the league in franchising, which is something we'll talk about in a second with the LCK. They got kicked out of the league, and they were absent for the league, and then they came back by buying Clutch. And they wanted to have a team that, while competitive, moved the needle as a brand. Dignitas, in between the time that they came back into League of Legends 5 months ago, with the rebranding of Clutch, and the time that they got kicked out of the LCS in the franchise system, they were incredibly irrelevant. What can you tell me Dignitas had other than a Rocket League team in esports? They had nothing. This was an irrelevant brand that Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment paid a lot of money for Apex and Dignitas back in the day, 2016. They paid a lot of money back then to make this merger happen. They invested even more money. This is an organization that's very successful in sports with the Devils and the Sixers. These are two very popular. Even when they were bad, the Sixers were fairly popular. Like, they're a successful sports org, and they wanted to be relevant. And so hitching your toe to Huni, that seemed, at least at the time, a really good decision. For him, he wanted to be the highest paid player in the LCS. That was the resounding sentiment. He wasn't in the end. That is still Impact, who had that $3.4 million 3-year contract that he signed. This is the final year of that contract, so it's the largest of the 3 years. But Huni was damn close. He was probably about $100,000 shot of being equally paid as in the same bracket as Impact. So it made a lot of sense here for both parties here. They wanted to be popular. Huni's immensely popular, charismatic. Don't forget, like, when he first joined Fnatic and Immortals, how popular and how that his brand came along with it. And so it made sense, but it doesn't make sense now. I mean, the other part I just want to say on that is Huni's got two options here, right? He can either stay in the U.S. and be in the LCS, which I don't think will happen.
What team is taking him? What team, honestly, what team is taking him?
Chat seems to think that Evil Geniuses would be a good fit, but like EG's already shelled out enough money. I don't see them making that financial bet, right? Like, they've already spent a lot of
and they have two imports. They have Jizuke and Bang.
Which means you have to give up one.
You'd have to take a player out.
And not only that, they're on a hot streak, and they could very well contend for the LCS title. Why would they want to make any changes?
Right. I agree. And then the other part of this, right, is that his other option is South Korea. Because if he leaves, he can't come back. There's no way he's going to go to Europe, right? Like, because of the pandemic. He could either go, if he leaves the U.S., he will not be back. So if he decides to go home for a break in the midst of all this, he's not coming back, at least for a while, because of what's going on with the pandemic. They will not let him back in the country as a Korean citizen. So he can either go back and try to get on an LCK team. I don't even know which LCK team, one, needs a top laner like him, and two, has the money to afford it.
Guardians out of the LCS Spring Split playoffs with a 3-0 performance. Emily, very impressive from FlyQuest. They move on in the losers bracket in the Spring Split.
Yeah, so for me, if people saw me yelling, like, kind of silently, but just be like, yeah, like, it's because I was watching the team fight around the river. But I think the things that I liked from FlyQuest, obviously they've used the strength of Pantheon, which I always think is pretty fun. Pantheon's the kind of champion that you either look pretty good on or really bad on. I've seen a lot of bad Pantheons in LPL in terms of the fact that you just keep going in and if he's behind, doesn't do as well. But they played really well. They had actually like insane jungle control. I was looking at some of the stats that were tweeted out, and apparently like Santorin just had a complete dominion over like Scuttle Crabs and Vision. I think they made the most of how they want to play around Ignar also, bringing out like the Blitz and the Pike. Like it's best when FlyQuest can have Ignar always roaming, so you never know where he's going to be on the map. I think that plays to his strengths, and I think they played to those strengths today. That's like kind of my instant reaction to what was going on. I actually expected this to be a lot messier. I expected like a back and forth, just like not great quality 3-2, I think is what I predicted for FlyQuest in my bracket. But it was nice to see FlyQuest come out and have such a strong performance because it seemed like they regrouped and really focused on their strengths as a team, specifically, like I said, around Santorin and Ignar.
So what does this mean for Golden Guardians? They had this miracle Cinderella circumstance happen for them to even get in the playoffs, right? They had to go win 3 straight. They had to get some help from other teams in order for them to even qualify, but then they don't even win a game in the playoffs. They fizzle out, and all that momentum is gone. So with all the talk about, we just talked about Huni, leaving Dignitas, and I'm just wondering, do you think, Tyler, that this means we might see some changes with Golden Guardians as a result of this result?
No, I mean, I think this team was supposed to be terrible. This team was supposed to be historically bad. I mean, I feel like
according to them, right? The video
I feel like if you polled most of the pundits in the community before the season started, most people would have, I think 90% of them would have probably ranked Golden Guardians last.
We did.
And they made the playoffs, and even though they didn't win a game against a very good FlyQuest team, doesn't mean they should blow it up. I mean, Hui's only been in the starting roster for a little under a month. I think this roster, especially at this short time window before summer, I think you really just Closer did not have a good series today. He was definitely bested by a more experienced jungler in Santorin. So Closer is good. Is your rock. He's the player you really want to build around for years to come, in my opinion. So I think you really just keep this 5 together. And if at the end of 2020, when hopefully the pandemic has kind of subsided and we are moving on to more of a normal pace and we kind of have more clarity and there's a longer time to kind of make moves, that's when you kind of pick and choose who your core players are and then maybe go out and try to get a big player, like a big signing to try to, up your team from playoff, pretender, 6th place, 7th place team to a top 2, maybe a championship contender. But right now, you just keep it as is. Right now, they are a decent dark horse team. Maybe they can improve in summer. They'll probably make the world top 8, because in the playoffs in the summer, the top 8 teams make it. So roll the dice, maybe get a miracle run to the Worlds. Who knows? But don't mix up the roster. Keep it the same.
So what does this mean for FlyQuest, Emily? I mean, they lost to EG 3-1. I think many of us predicted that one. We'll look, we'll go over our brackets maybe a little bit later on. But now they move on. They're going to await the winner of TSM and 100 Thieves. Based on these 2 games in the playoffs, Emily, have FlyQuest given you any sort of confidence that they might continue their run here?
I mean, I think they were given, like I kind of hinted at, I actually think they were given a lot of leeway in draft. Draft doesn't decide everything in NA, but in these specific cases, I think we saw a lot of things go through that were just really comfortable for FlyQuest. Ignar's picks that I mentioned previously, the LeBlanc for PoE. I think it's still really difficult for me to say, yes, FlyQuest has fixed all their issues and they're going to go for it and they're going to look a lot stronger. I've said this all year, when they really have that team identity around creating skirmishes, around creating picks, because you have all of these players that really want to go in and they want to fight. And if they can set up those skirmishes, especially with Ignar roaming, it looks really, really good. But they're really inconsistent about that. And I I mean, the positive side is that I can't say that the other LCS teams have been consistent. Like TSM, I've also noted about how they want to play, like very obviously how this team wants to play, and they have been incredibly inconsistent across the board. So it's and that's who I'm expecting to get out of the bracket. But if it's also 100T, there's a similar situation where yes, they did improve later on in the season, but there's a very specific style that they want to play, and they've been very inconsistent. So I think FlyQuest should feel good about today. But in terms of how they'll match up against either TSM or 100T, that's going to be really difficult for me because none of these teams have been consistent throughout the season.
So we saw Evil Geniuses defeat FlyQuest. They're going to face C9 next. C9 obliterated 100 Thieves. That clearly the correct choice for them to choose to play 100 Thieves over FlyQuest, right? Although I do believe that C9 would have defeated both in a best of 5. I think we all agree with that. We all picked C9 to win the entire thing. I'm sure 99% of people watching right now did the exact same thing. But let's make the case otherwise. I mean, based on what we haven't seen TSM play yet, to be fair. They're playing 100 Thieves next, later this week. Is there, based on what you've seen with Evil Geniuses, even FlyQuest, Tyler, is there any hope at all that any of these playoff teams can contend against C9?
No. This is a joke. Move on.
I thought you were going to keep laughing, and I was just going to be like,
No,
like,
move on. This question is silly.
Tyler's Omega Wall
Nothing.
in our
This question is ridiculous, Arda.
You don't believe in the Italian Stallion?
No, the Italian Stallion. I mean, look at the narrative that was no one expected 100 Thieves to win versus C9, but they expected Someday to show up, right? Where, Someday was robbed. Someday was robbed of the first place LCS top laner. And then Licorice just dominated them. It's a joke. This is a joke. This entire playoff system is a joke. Just give C9 the trophy. They're so much better than every single team in this league. Until someone proves otherwise, I'm going to call everyone else a joke. Everyone else is a joke until a team actually proves that they're good enough to beat C9 and actually take a game off them. I'm not even going to think of a world where C9 can be challenged. None of these teams deserve even TSM. Okay. None of these teams deserve it. Just move on. This question is silly. C9 are the Kingsland Crown. They're going to win this tournament, maybe losing one map at best, and they're going to win. It's a silly question, artist.
Okay, fine. But, and I'm going to flip the script here just a little bit and move things in our rundown here. It might have also seemed silly, Tyler, to predict Mad Lions defeating G2.
Dun, dun, dun.
Who would make this? Don't bring up the tape, Arda. Don't bring
We're just stopping. We're like, what are you talking about?
We don't need to look at my bracket. My bracket is 100% on both sides. I am doing great. I've not got one prediction wrong so far.
Okay, so let's dive into that. Okay, Mad Lions beat G2, 3-2. However, the first thing I want to say, Emily, is Mad Lions Nexus in that game 5 was down to 20 HP. Okay? 20 HP. And still, somehow...
hilarious.
What happened in this series? How did Mad Lions pull this off, Emily?
So I think it's a combination of, like, a lot of people are taking this victory away from Mad Lions because they're just like, G2, they're trolling, they don't care about this game. The bracket's messed up because you have a team like G2 can just fart around and they'll be back, which I have my own thoughts about that, but I'm going to put that aside because I actually think that's a bit unfair to Mad Lions because when we talked about Mad Lions, and I brought this up last week, talking to LEC teams, they said that Mad Lions was actually the most dangerous team in this bracket because what they had shown, I assume in scrims, and sometimes on stage too, is that they had a remarkably high ceiling that this team could reach if everything was working, like if they were playing at their best, right? So if everything is working, if they drafted well, if they played to their win conditions, they have the talent and the communication to knock off some of these teams. I did not expect them to knock off G2, by the way. And I believe me and Jacob were the two highest people on Mad Lions, if I remember correctly.
You're
and
damn
neither
right.
of us had them beat.
I have no recollection.
Tyler was over here like, setting up the campfire, and Mad Lions was the chicken over the roast.
I have no recollection.
Not enough credit. You're not giving. Go find the tape of the river.
Yeah.
I said
Wow.
that no one on this panel, and mostly Tyler, no one was giving Mad Lions enough credit. And
Hey,
guess what?
I
They
give them
advanced.
credit. I gave them credit, but I think for me, it's really hard to bet on a team that's just that inconsistent, right? So, but anyway, like the thing with Mad Lions is that I think talking to teams around the league, they knew that they had the talent. It was just about, can they draft well? Can they play to their win conditions? Can they go up against G2 like individually? And something that I feel like not enough people are talking about with G2, and they're over focusing, and maybe it's just like who I've seen talking about it. So correct me if this is being discussed elsewhere, because I haven't actually checked Reddit or anything but Twitter to kind of see what people's takes are on this and talking to people privately. But, G2 had this role swap going in, and it really looks like Caps is not nearly as comfortable in that bot lane position as Perks was last year. And so, I think I know some people have been calling for them to swap back, but in the midst of discussing, are people playing faster and looser online? Does the LEC playoff bracket suck? I think two things have been lost. One, Mad Lions have the talent to beat anyone, which is super impressive, and I don't think any of us called it. Like, Jacob is going to say he called Mad Lions doing well more than the rest of us in free agency show, and I can back him up on that. But I don't think he expected them to be like a top 2 team in Europe or anything. And I would say they're not a top 2 team in Europe, but they did beat G2. I think they do have the talent to beat anyone and seemingly in a best of 5 if they bring everything together, have a really good day, their communication is clicking, they play their win conditions, and they draft well. So that's, again, like insanely impressive for this Mad Lions team. And I don't think the fact that people are playing looser online can take that away from them. And then the other thing I think people really need to be bringing up and looking at is that this role swap does not look like it has worked out as well as G2 had hoped. And
Flip the switch.
What is going to happen going into either the rest of this playoff bracket or going into summer split? Are they going to swap back?
Doesn't want to switch. That's the question.
That is the other question. Yeah.
Does this roster look the same then by the end of the summer, or by even the start of the summer?
I can guarantee that Perks is going nowhere. I mean, we've talked about franchise players.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Carlos has told us that he could see Perks as an executive in G2.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Caps is going to get traded or leaving the team, but you have a challenge on your hands now, right, Jacob?
You and I were there, right? Like the two of us talked to Carlos in that interview, and he talked about how it doesn't work to swap back, and like there's obviously a lot of ego on this G2 team, so I'm hoping that like it's that simple. Is like, oh yeah, you flip it back, the 2019 World Championship runner-up instantly again, right? But like, I don't know. I felt like I was watching an LPL game in Mad versus G2.
Wow.
In the best way possible.
Yeah, I was like, this is
possible.
great. I love this. It was awesome.
But like, yeah, like our chat's giving Mac a lot of like credit for draft, and he like deserves it, right? Like this was, I don't know if off meta is the right word. I don't think it is, but it's certainly like, this is not the way that like North American teams are, even other European teams are playing right now. And G2 sort of just like threw it out there. Mad Lions also did the same, and like Mad Lions got the better of the two, right? Playing like sort of off the wall picks. And so I definitely think that they deserve credit where credit is due on that respect, or on that perspective. And like, I think they should make the swap mid-split. Don't think it's realistic to make a roster change at this point. I don't think that's the right call, but there's a lot of ego in this G2 team. And I hope that everyone's ego is not fragile enough that making the swap back would hurt them in terms of their
hold on, though.
chemistry.
Jacob, hold on a second. If you were to ask members of G2, and we even asked Carlos this, he would say that there is no ego on this team, that they function as a unit. You don't believe this at all. You don't believe that at all.
It's easy to say that when you're winning.
I was about to say, it's
Okay.
easy to say that when you dominated your region, right? I would say that Caps, the original Caps to G2 transition and Perks to AD carry position is ever seen in League of Legends history, right? And I think that in that case, right, like it worked. And so of course you're going to feel good. Of course you're going to feel good. You won you won and you outsmarted everyone. You recruited the best mid laner in the region and Caps at the time away from Fnatic. And if you don't think that there's animosity between the players of Fnatic and the players of G2, you're wrong. The players and ownership do not get along.
Of course, that's like the biggest rivalry in League of Legends. Of course,
and it's super fierce. And so if you don't think that like they were riding high last year because and Carlos can say what he said because they outsmarted Fnatic, right, in what they did, and that they dominated their region and went and competed on the international stage in the way they did. It's easy to say there's not ego when there's winning, but there is a lot of ego on that team.
Okay, but there's also a lot of track record of success. And that brings me to the next question is, where does G2 go from here? We created a poll, and people in chat at least seem to think, I think it was, I can't see the results, 71% said no, G2 not winning the split as a result of what they've seen.
Ooh.
Let me regale you,
Spicy.
if you can indulge me for 30 seconds, let me regale you of the story of the San Francisco Shock and Overwatch League. You see, in Stage 4, they had a terrific regular season, riding high into the playoffs, only to be dismantled in the winner's bracket by the pesky Atlanta Reign, led by Dogman and Baby Bay, two of the more charismatic players in the league. See you later, San Francisco, down to the loser's bracket. What happened then? Tyler, Emily, and Jacob. Let me tell you what happened then. Not a single map was conceded by this team. They marched forward. They got onto their dominance train, and they choo-chooed all the way to the grand finals in Philadelphia, where they stared the Vancouver Titans right in the face, and they said, we are sending you to second placeville, population U, San Francisco, without losing a single map. Hoist the trophy.
Arda, I have no idea. I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what an is. I just know.
I'll say
I know exactly what I'm talking about.
There's a bit of a difference in how the Shock were able to use a rotating roster to the best of their ability last year, which is actually super impressive because, like I said in my LPL show and here,
and oranges. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Well, my point is, if there is a thing with this role swap, and they want to swap back and then somebody doesn't want to, like that is an issue that's kind of related, right? Because like we don't know what's going on internally with whether they are going to even consider that. So we'll see.
The next
I do think
HP, folks.
I mean, I do think G2 will beat Origin or Rogue, whoever comes out of that.
I agree with that. I think I don't know.
Is this Fnatic's time?
Wow.
I do think this is Fnatic's time. I actually don't disagree with you. I think that this is to win a LEC playoff, right? Like, good on them.
How much, going back to that rivalry, how much do they want to be the team to nail the final nail in that coffin? How much would they love that?
Every single bit of it. Every person who works for Fnatic gets a pay. And all of them want to be the one to put the nail in the G2 coffin. They despise G2, and it's not a secret. And so, yeah, if they do it, we will not hear the end of it for a while.
Well, that's what we love. Competition like that and rivalries like that. So that is Mad Lions defeating G2. Let's go now to another big piece of news. If you're just joining us, thank you very much. This is the Rift Rewind. It's an ESPN League of Legends show. This is our 10th episode. We are live every Tuesday night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Tuesday, guys. Tuesday.
Boom.
Letting you know. We talked earlier about Huni and Dignitas parting ways, Huni being able to look at other options despite having that $2.3 million contract. We also just spoke about Mad Lions defeating G2, sending G2 down to the losers bracket to the surprise of everyone. In fact, Quick Shot literally said after that matchup, I am flabbergasted, I am stunned, I am at a loss for words, I cannot explain the game. Now let's talk about what is happening in the LCK. This is the final major region to adopt franchising. That is right. Franchising will be coming to the league starting in 2021. Emily, you wrote an article that is available at espn.com/esports. Fill us in on all the details.
Yeah, so I basically took pretty much everything that's on the future of LCK.com website. But there are a couple of things that stand out to me here. First of all, in the intro, so every single franchise league had a website that people could go to and look at what is franchising, how are we doing this? What's the schedule? So I'll go over the schedule, but then first of all, I wanted to note that if you read the a new beginning part, I think the lead in with LCK, World's Greatest LoL League, appearing at 6 LoL World Championship Finals and winning 5 of them in only 9 years of World's history. They set it up like franchising is going to be the solution to Korea returning to dominance, which is a really interesting way to sell people on franchising. So I kind of wanted to throw that out there first because they basically say, this is all in the past. Now we have to prepare for our next step as a challenger. And then they introduce franchising. I thought that was a very interesting way of being we used to be really, really good. We haven't won Worlds in 2 years. We need to do something, and franchising is our solution. I just thought it's an interesting way of framing it, and I'm not sure if it's because South Korea isn't really as familiar with a franchise system as the West is, more specifically as the United States is, to be honest. But then additionally, here's the schedule. Starting now, so starting on April 6th, teams can submit their applications, which includes three major parts that have to do with branding, the actual team ownership, and then being a part of the franchise system. This is nothing new. If anyone remembers the LCS initial franchising and then the LEC franchising, those were both in there as well. They basically give you an outline of what they want from every team. And this is available on a website that anyone can access. So any team can apply. It's not like current LCK teams are being get automatic bids at these slots or anything like that. Nothing. Technically everyone is on an even playing field. They all have to submit applications, whether they're currently in the LCK right now or whether they're completely outside of it. So that happens from April 6th to June 19th. Then June through August, Riot Korea will be reviewing all of their applications that they receive and be conducting interviews with team owners and orgs. And then the early signings are scheduled to take place in September. And then late in September, they will announce the official franchises for LCK. So that's kind of the basic outline of what is happening. The thing that a lot of, I think, people are hung up on just in terms of the Korean reaction has been how promotion relegation is not going to work anymore, because basically this coming spring promotion relegation is the last time that Korea will ever have promotion relegation. And promoting in doesn't give you a bigger shot. So if you're a Challengers Korea team, promoting in, it's not going to give you a massive advantage as opposed to someone who gets relegated, depending on what package you deliver to the LCK and how you're organizing your application, which, as Jacob can attest to, is very important, what you put in your application. So.
Yeah, I actually right now I pulled it up looking at partnership application in the LCS partnership application in front of me right now, open in my Google Drive, which is the criteria that they asked for LCS teams. it seems very similar in terms of what I remember in that versus what actually happened in the or what they put out on the LCK website. So I want to talk a little bit about this process and how it went in North America and how I think it's actually going to be a little bit different in South Korea. So in North America, you could contact the league office, people who worked at the Riot League office, and essentially like say that you were interested in applying and learning more information. They would send you the document that I have now in front of me, and essentially you would go through it. And so this document, and I haven't seen the LCK one, although I'm sure I will. This document was broken down into ownership profile, which was a little bit of like background information about who your group that was applying are, who owns your corporation. What have they done in the past from a business perspective, right? Like what is it, have they built successful startups in the past? Do they own traditional sports teams? What is their background, right? And then the second part was the brand plan. How are you going to grow your brand? What are some of your ideas to contribute to the LCS at the time, now the LCK? How are you going to make your brand bigger in South Korea? How are you going to make it bigger globally? How can you contribute, right? Like what does your brand and marketing strategy look like? And then the third part was the business plan. It was focused a lot on how much money do you already have that you can invest? Where does that money come from? Where is that money going to be spent? How do you anticipate spending it? And then eventually, how do you anticipate to make it back? What is your 5 to 10 year plan to make revenues, right? And then the last part of it was your team plan. Who are your team management? What type of nutritionists and trainers and psychologists and all these people that in your organization, how are you going to make your team successful, right? What type of infrastructure are you going to build around the team? And that was the big focus. In the LCS, there were about 200 people that applied. If you remember what the teams were at the time, the ones that eventually got let go were Immortals, Envy, Dignitas, and Phoenix One, right? And a lot of people were surprised back then, right? Like Immortals was this huge, who are now in our chat, no offense, FlyQuest got in, and Echo Fox got in, and now Echo Fox well documented everything that happened and was wrong even at the time. Right,
hey, Jacob. Why
these two people get in and Immortals didn't? Right, like Immortals was one of the most successful teams in League at the time, but at the time, also Immortals didn't know how they were spending money they were hemorrhaging money, and they didn't know how to make it back. They didn't have good answers to that, right? And so I don't think it's all just about team performance. We could look at the best teams in the LCK and go, oh yeah, those people are going to make it for sure. But there's a real chance here that one of the high performing teams this year in the LCK could just not make it back if they don't have satisfactory answers. Because this is a long-term thing for Riot, right? These are people they're going to be in business with for a long time.
Jacob, why do you always wait for FlyQuest to come into the chat to dig them?
Yeah.
I like the FlyQuest people. I don't know who's in the...
It's like you knew they were going to come, and you were just waiting and prolonging the flame.
Okay. Wait. I will say one thing about FlyQuest that actually as I understand, was very beneficial to them, and I respect. So,
wait, there's a very important question in the chat, Jacob. There's a very important question in the chat. Stillwell says, "Why does Jacob hate FlyQuest?" Can we get to the bottom of this?
Okay, I am about to say something.
Do you hate trees? Do you hate the environment?
I'm about to say something that is highly respectable about FlyQuest as an organization. Okay, so the next part of this process, the interview process, is that hold on. I'm going to take it at the top. So, all right, hear me out. All right, so. There was the application.
Sorry, our producer keeps laughing.
Please tell us. We're waiting.
All right.
Okay.
So after you submit these applications, Riot narrowed it down to a stack full of people. And they said all of these stack full of people, which at the time included G2 and the NALCS, by the way. That nearly happened. They said all these people, send your best people to Los Angeles. Come to Los Angeles, right? And meet with us. Talk to Waylon Roselle and Chris Greeley and all the people that work in esports at Riot Games, right? Have these conversations. A lot of these companies are owned by billionaires. And a lot of the billionaires sent the people that worked for them and actually didn't show up themselves. They sent their CEOs, their presidents, etc. Guess who did show up? Wesley Edens, the owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. The freaking Milwaukee Bucks, one of the most successful teams in the NBA. He is the founder of FlyQuest, and he went himself. And that's incredibly respectable that he took time out of his day to go to LA for a couple days and meet with Riot Games, because no other billionaire did. And so to FlyQuest's credit, their founder actually cared about what they were doing. So I will give them that respect. But that said, LCK teams, LCK teams, if you're watching this, LCK teams, if you're watching this, if you're watching this LCK teams and you want to ensure, send the people that actually write your checks. Don't just send your like child or your manager or whatever it may be. Please send the actual people. It will go very far with Riot, I promise.
FlyQuest in the chat, are you convinced that Jacob doesn't hate you? Please respond in the chat. That's what I'd like to know.
I actually know that Tyler wants to make a point, so go to him first. But I have something to say based on what Jacob just said about Korea specifically.
Now let's go back to the LCK franchising conversation. Just the idea that they are the last major region to do so. By the way, I believe it's Brazil and Turkey that will be following suit as well in 2021. The article, we will link it in the chat actually, that Emily wrote in detail, chronicling how the LCK will go about this. The interesting part to me was that there's no guarantees here, right? I mean, not that we would ever think of seeing a world where T1 is not part of the LCK, given their pedigree and their history, etc. But that's my point. My point is that there's no guarantees here. It's not like, oh, okay, you didn't get relegated, so you have first dibs. There is no first dibs here, which I actually found surprising here. Any team can bid, and they don't have to be in the LCK currently. And if you are in the LCK, you don't get preferential treatment on whether or not you get approved or not. It is all up for grabs. There's an interview process, etc. This is going to I do have something to report here. This is what my sources are telling me. You do get preferential pricing if you make it. Right. But so if you are T1 or Gen G, T1, Gen G, any Hanwha Life, Sandbox, whatever you may be, any of these teams, KT Rolster, you do get preferential pricing, and you are expected to get a buyout if you get kicked. That is also that's how it worked in the LCS and the LEC.
Yeah, I was going to say correct. That's how it works.
And it was scalable based on how many splits you participated. So like at the time, based on your current ownership. So if you changed ownership, like if T1 were to get kicked out because they changed ownership, their buyout would be lower because they changed ownership last year, right? The Comcast Spectacor, the Philadelphia Fusion, Philadelphia Flyers, or bought part of them. However, yes. Somebody making me laugh in chat. Anyway, focus, man. Anywho, yes, you do get a buyout, and it is expected that the LCK teams that are currently participating, if they make it, they will get a preferential pricing, which was around like $2.8 to $3 million in the LEC and LCS. Cheaper.
Emily, what will this actually, you mentioned go to Tyler first. Tyler, what will this mean for the economics of the LCK? What kind of contracts are we going to see? Are we going to see, like, what will the landscape look like after franchising?
It'll be great for South Korea. I don't understand this notion that Korea is not, like, it doesn't understand franchising or it's not built for franchising. For one, esports in Korea was built off franchises, off Samsung and Hype Beer and SKT and KT. And if you look at, there's no other country in the world that's more ready for franchising esports than South Korea. Look at the biggest sporting league in South Korea is the KBO, the Korean baseball organization. And each team it's not the Incheon Warriors or the Seoul Tigers. It's the SK Wyverns, the LG Twins, the KT Wiz, the Samsung Lions, the Hanwha Eagles. And if you can understand, a few of those teams I just named are in the LCK. So I don't think there's any other region that's more ready for franchising than a country that is run by like 10 to 12 companies. If I was in South Korea,
they call it the shy ball for a reason. It's the old Korean money, and that it sits at the top of these companies.
Yeah. And I think for the LCK, like I know we can just not T1 could. if they can just send a picture of Faker and they're going to be let it. I mean, they're owned by Comcast.
Is that
and SK Telecom.
their application is simply here's a headshot of Faker and now we're in.
They have money, prestige, and they're the national. They're essentially the de facto South Korean national team.
LCK teams, make your application more than 17 pages, please, and don't write it the night before. I'm sure that some of you know which executive I'm referring to. Certain redheaded one that no longer works in his org anymore.
Wow.
Let me just warm my hands on Jacob's flame here.
Wrote it the night before, and then had the gall to tell a Riot employee that he wrote it the night before. That's the problem. It's so
I have something to piggyback on actually it also ties into Jacob's rant, but on what Tyler said, because I think it's a yes and no thing, right? I think yes, Korea is ready for franchising and the orgs have wanted it for a while. I think my hangups, and Jacob, I went on the ESPN Esports podcast in 2017 to talk about this, is that Korea and business in Korea is very top heavy. So you have a lot of teams that either, even if they did have a ton of money, just weren't like previously, like the Samsung, the CJ Entus, who both pulled out, weren't investing money in their League of Legends teams. They were just running them with like very minimal salaries. And so when a lot of Chinese and North American, specifically some European, but mainly LPL and LCS teams started bidding for the same Korean talent, they were just like, whatever, we'll just pay these other guys like less money because this is a marketing arm for us. So the way that they used to see like business in that regard as it related to the LCK was a bit different. It was more of like an extra marketing thing for them that wasn't super, super expensive to operate. Obviously, times have changed and teams are paying a lot better salaries and it's a lot different now. But as late as like 2017, I think there was a definite, and I think there still is, a definite difference between, you know, SK Telecom and Comcast, Korea Telecom, Gen.G and their funding, even Africa, I would say, because they're backed by Africa TV and a few other, South Korean businesses. But like, there's a huge difference between those teams and like, even like Griffin right now, APK Prince. If you look at the teams in Korean Challenger, we have, I guess like Jin Green Wings, Element Mystic, Team Dynamics, and then like Sorabo Gaming, which is the like Kakao Tall Songyun team. I think there's a definite difference between the people at the top and rounding out this to have 10 teams that are all very healthy financially and willing to invest. So, but the other part of the point that I wanted to make is I covered this kind of a little bit in my off-season discussion around Gen.G, but generally my impression of Korea, and someone who is actually South Korean should correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a lot more bureaucratic. KESPA is involved for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot more like steps that people are automatically going to follow. So no, I don't think you'll get someone who's just going to write their application the day before and have it only be 17 pages, because the expectation in this kind of business setup is already that you are going to go through those steps. You are going to talk to people. You are going to present, at least on the outside, a very clear, concise plan of business, because again, like South Korea is a lot more bureaucratic when it comes to these things. And there's a lot more weird layers of business to kind of sift through. Right. My reservations are that the funding at the top, again, is going to be great. And I think in that regard, Korea is super prepared for franchising, like Tyler said. But I also think I'm a bit concerned about who's going to round out that top 10 teams.
And we'll see how many Americans want to invest, because there are very many. I mean, I said this on a video that Arda, you and Emily and I did yesterday. The Chicago Cubs were an applicant in the LCS and they got declined. Right? This is a World Series baseball team.
So there's a high level of people. There's a high level
that want to be in the ecosystem and have not made it. Yeah. So I'll see. I'm curious to see sort of how many of these people who got declined for LCS and LEC now apply for LCK.
So we're going to...
It's the last frontier, by the way. That's the other thing. Like, it is the last of the four. It's your last opportunity.
So we're definitely going to cover this story as it moves along here at ESPN Esports. Before we have some fun, we got bucket list coming up. But in the chat previously, while we were talking about Mad Lions and G2, I want to really quickly cover this, maybe 1 point each before we move on. They said, what? So they won't talk about Fnatic versus Origin? Yes, we will talk about Fnatic versus Origin. Fnatic actually moving on in the winners bracket. They defeated Origin 3-1. They will now face Mad Lions in the semifinals. Meanwhile, OG moved down, will face Rogue. Possibly could face each other again. Who knows? But really quickly, let's do one thought around the horn here, starting with you, Jacob. Are you surprised at all? Because I think all of us picked Fnatic to win that series.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, like, I think Fnatic, to what we just said earlier, right, is that I think that Fnatic is head and shoulders above most of Europe. I don't, this result went the way that it went, and I think that that's no different. I think that Fnatic is probably going to be, after seeing G2, if they don't change something up, I think that Fnatic is going to be the LEC champion this spring.
Emily?
So no, not surprising.
I was surprised that we didn't possibly see some different picks coming out of Fnatic, but I also think that they really stuck to I know we've talked about kind of how Reckless really likes to find like one thing that he just wants to come back to over and over to carry. And in this series, it was the Senna. But I think Fnatic, especially with some of Nemesis's picks, we might see some different stuff going forward. And I'm not sure if that's because they felt like they could beat Origin without them, but I kind of want to see like the TF come out, the Vigar come out, because I think they'd be kind of solid picks, and there's something that we've seen Fnatic play before. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, this series told me that Fnatic may still be reserving some of their pocket picks for down the road.
Tyler?
It went as I predicted, 3-1 for Fnatic. It's nice to see Diana and Pro play. Nemesis is a fun player to watch. I really like watching him kind of grow as a player, and he's kind of a different kind of European mid lane star. You usually have these mid lane stars who are very lane focused, and you have the Fevins and the Capses and the Perks, where you have these big flashy plays, where I think Nemesis is more of an all-around type of player, and he's very selfless for the teams a lot of times. So I'm really enjoying Nemesis' evolution as a player, and I really do think if Fnatic does go on to win the split, it's going to be a lot to think because of Nemesis.
All right, so we've been following chat this entire time, and we appreciate all of you being there, including FlyQuest, who decided to join our chat. We appreciate that as well. We're going to move on to Bucket List. Now, this is how we're going to end the show, actually. Ooh. So we know,
let's go.
You watching us here on Rift Rewind love when we do a little bit of that fantasy booking. What do we?
We had AEW chat in here from FlyQuest. FlyQuest wanted to take me to an AEW match post Corona. So we've got plenty of wrestling fantasy booking people that show up in this chat. I appreciate it.
And FlyQuest, I hope you're still here, because we're actually going to start with you on the fantasy booking here. So what we like to do with Bucket List is we like to take different teams, whether they're even in the same time frame, whether they're in the same region, it doesn't matter. We are hypothesizing here. We are giving you instant analysis on matchups that may or may not ever be able to happen, and that's why you love it. I'm going to be manning the polls, so every single matchup, you will be able to vote on it as well. Speaking of voting, 86% of our chat said that Jacob Wolf hates FlyQuest. 86%, Jacob.
How dare you, Jacob?
6%.
Far from true. I have eaten some of the best breakfast ever in Austin, Texas, with the current CEO of FlyQuest and her staff. This is not true.
So here are the buckets that we're starting with. These are the 2020 LEC playoff contenders. We have past LEC and EU LCS champions in here. Okay, these are my mugs, and we have past LEC champions here. This is all very official, by the way. I worked very hard on this, okay? This here, and then we also have 2020 LCS playoffs, okay? And since FlyQuest, you're in the chat here, we're going to start with you. So FlyQuest is our first choice here, okay? That's FlyQuest right here. So, Emily, we're going to start with you. Pick a bucket. Do you want me to go past LCS champions, or do you want me to go current LEC playoff contenders or past LEC champions?
Let's go past LEC champions.
Okay, so here's past LEC champions, and they're all in there crumpled up. Okay, and I'm going to pick one. And
this is very high production. I love it.
High production. And we are going. Oh wow! So it's going to be FlyQuest versus 2016 G2. This is the matchup.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to manage the poll, and while I create this poll, analyze this hypothetical matchup. 2016 G2 taking on 2020 FlyQuest. Who's got it and why, Emily?
Can I ask, is this at an international event, or is
you can actually create your own rules?
Are they in the same domestic league? Because my answer changes, and I think anyone who saw 2016 G2 will understand.
Tell us why. Tell us why. Best of 5, best of 1. Give us every scenario.
Wait, Emily, before you start, remind people what the 2016 G2 roster is for those unfamiliar.
So it did change. For people who don't remember, it did change from spring to summer. So our first roster, if people remember, was we've got Kickus, Trick, Perks, Emperor, and Hybrid. And then
I think this is the championship roster, by the way. That's what it's supposed to be, which is the summer one.
Yeah. And then the summer one. So you want the one that didn't choke at MSI. You want the one that choked at Worlds. So we've got Kickus, Expect, Trick, Perks, Sven, and Mithy. So this is actually the first look at what would become in my opinion, a really, really strong G2 lineup. I don't know what happened to them every time they came onto an international stage, but 2016 was not a good year for G2 at international competition. I think if I am looking at this roster and the way that they played specifically at that time, it'd be a really weird matchup for FlyQuest because I think Trick had a very specific jungle style that I actually believe in. Santorin is actually one of my favorite junglers to watch in LCS. For those who don't know, I've said this previously on other shows, but I think he's a really smart jungler. I think he can also do that thing where he draws a lot from his experience and react really well. And although people might not think much of Trick now, at this time he was considered one of the better junglers in Europe. He was kind of a more farming jungler, a little bit less of what you see now. I think he was a little bit less passive, but still generally would farm up and wait to affect his lanes. And I actually think that Santorin would be able to take advantage of that. However, the real matchups come from how you regard Perks, Sven, and Mithy. And just looking at this team outside of their international hangups, I still think that G2 summer 2016 would beat FlyQuest 2020 spring, because when this team did get it together and did get off those mid to late game team fights, I think they are a lot stronger, and they were outside of international competition, a lot more consistent in their play style and in their own region in domestic play as to their record, their win rate, and just how they wanted to play.
Anybody disagree?
I mean, no. FlyQuest said in the chat, pro FlyQuest argument, we have never lost an international tournament. Can G2 say the same?
You know what?
What do you say to that?
2016 is the year to rag on G2 for that, for sure.
I love it. All right, Tyler, you're up. Pick 2 buckets.
Give me current LCS and playoff team and historic LCS team.
Okay, so we're going all LCS for you. So
yeah, all LCS. Let's go LCS.
Okay, so current LCS is right here. So I'm going to pick... This is very high-tech, by the way. I can't believe how high-tech we're getting here.
I love it.
Okay. And so you have selected... You got TSM.
TSM.
You got TSM.
2020 TSM.
Okay, so you got TSM as your first team, and past LCS champions. Okay. Oh, wow. Look at that.
2014 TSM. Double the
Wow.
TSM.
TSM
What a
versus TSM.
fantasy matchup that is. Okay, 2020 TSM versus 2014 TSM. Who you got, Tyler, and why?
And remind them of the roster of 2014 TSM.
I have to remind myself of the 2014.
I'm going to look it up right now.
I believe.
2014
Wait. Before anybody says that, I want to give it a shot off the top of my head. Dyrus,
Yep.
amazing.
Yep.
Bjergsen,
Yep.
Wild Turtle,
Yep.
Yep.
Lust Boy.
No.
No. That's 15. Why am I forgetting support? It's special. It's special, right? Yes.
No.
Why am I forgetting Glebe?
Dyrus is correct.
Glebe. Is
Yeah,
it Glebe?
it's Glebe.
Glebe.
Nicholas Haddad. Sub
Wait,
support.
no. Glebe got replaced mid-split. Did he not?
He did get replacement.
Oh, yeah,
He
that's
left
true.
He left in May 2014.
Bye, Lust Boy. Bye,
Yeah.
Lust Boy.
Lust Boy came in July 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah. He
Damn
came
you,
to
I was right.
The final
Amazing.
matches.
Bjergsen,
So,
Wild Turtle,
yeah.
Lust Boy.
All right, so this is the TSM team that stopped the C9 streak, stopped the C9 dynasty in NA. The last time
Correct.
C9 actually won a title. I think the 2020. This is hard because I feel like the 2014 TS team overperformed to what their skill level was. They knew who they were and they played around it. At this point, Dyrus knew who he was. This was the start of the Dyrus martyr phase where they would just let Dyrus get destroyed in the top lane and just kind of soak in every piece of pressure possible and play around everything but top lane. This was kind of the start of like Dyrus going from like the best top laner in NA to be sacrificial lame of NA. But they knew who they were. The TSM team of 2014 weren't the most talented team in NA, but they knew how to play around Bjergsen. They knew how to play into the late game. They knew how to play around Wild Turtle's crazy antics, how he would trade 1 kill for 2 kills. They knew how to they overperformed and they knew what their strengths were. And they kind of, in the end, turned out to be a really good team. Like, they went into Worlds. They got a bit unlucky by drawing Samsung White in the quarterfinals. From everything I've talked to from pros, coaches, they were really, really good at the 2014 World Championships. They were beating a lot of the Korean teams. They were beating Samsung Blue regularly. It was just Samsung White was that one team they really couldn't get over, and then they got put in the bracket with them. So for TSM 2014, it was a team
And
that
they
knew
won
what
a
they were.
game.
And
Now you can dispute. You can
Samsung
dispute.
trolled that game so
I was about to
hard.
say you
They
can.
trolled that game so hard.
That was the next sentence out of my mouth. You
Yeah.
can dispute the legitimacy of the
They still
game,
won, though. They still won.
but they still won a game. That is a fact. That is a fact.
The 2014 TSM is winning in the poll 55% to 45%.
I think it's really close because I think based on just talent, just based on talent and what their ceiling is, 2020 TSM is way higher for me than 2014 TSM. I think their talent level and what they can do if everyone is in the perfect form and they're all synergized, like we saw versus the C9 game. The only beat C9 the entire split was TSM at their peak, but they underperform again and again and again and again. So if I was supposed to pick who am I trusting between the 2014 TSM and the 2020 TSM, I'm gonna go with 2014 just because I know who they are and they know who they are. Where the 2020 TSM doesn't really know who they are yet. So I would say
real quick, Jacob.
I just wanted to say this is 2014 TSM had one of my favorite playoff series ever, which was TSM versus Dignitas, and I believe summer 2014, which was where Dyrus had to back in a base race against a Zion Spartan Nasus, in which Dyrus got, speaking of trees, Dyrus get chopped down as Maokai, and then Zion wins the game on the Nasus backdoor. It was good.
Is that back when Dignitas had an identity?
Yes.
Throwing at Baron?
Just got it.
That was the Zion.
They were relevant, is what you were saying earlier there, Jacob.
Yes, definitely so. They had they had gotten Shifter and Zion and I'm a Cutie Pie. That was a good roster. Those were the days.
Pick 2 buckets, Jacob.
I'm gonna pick current LEC and LEC/EU LCS of the past. Gonna go all Europe here.
I'm gonna have to do a lot of dishes after this, also. By the way. Okay, so this is your first team.
2020 G2. Okay.
Okay,
Alright.
G2 is your first
All
team.
right.
And then you said past LEC?
Past LEC. I'll keep it in
Past
region.
LEC. Okay.
There's a certain one in this bucket I really want.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yes. I got it. 2014 Alliance. Hell yes. That's the one I wanted. All right. So I will remind the people what the 2014 Alliance roster was. So top laner was Wicked. Jungler was, why am I blinking? Mid was Froggen.
Sure.
ADC was Tabs, because this is pre-elements. And support was, why am I forgetting support on that roster also? I'm going to look this
It
up.
was Shook was your
Yeah.
jungler.
It was Shook Jungle. And then who was support on that team?
It was
I'm
Nif,
trying to
right?
look this up right now.
Nif.
It was
Nif. That's correct. So it is Wicked, Shook, Froggen, Tabs, and Nif. Okay. So I think that 2020 G2 has a much better understanding of the game of League of Legends than 2014 Alliance.
Yes.
Yes.
But in
Wait,
Alliances, wait, I'm not picking Alliance. However, what
I
I
was
was
gonna
going
say
to
plot
say,
twist.
There's no way to
Jacob.
pick Alliance here.
but I was going to say, just generally, if you were to instill G2's game knowledge into 2014 Alliance, this is the one team that was crazy enough to make this a fun series. So yes, I will pick G2. They are much more advanced. They've figured it out. As long as Caps doesn't lay a giant turd in the bot lane, this series goes G2's way. However,
Wait, actually, yes,
Jacob.
yes.
they don't call him Craps for nothing. Anyway, if you gave 2014 Alliance 2020 G2's game knowledge, this is a very, very fun series, although I would still give the edge to G2.
So I was going to say,
it's a giant smash.
does Alliance have any chance against pre-roll swap G2 or post-roll swap G2?
No.
No. Both of them would be crushing Alliance in 2014. And I think the chat agrees, by the way. It's 100% G2. So
Wow.
Perks is the revitalizing of the European mid laner, and there's a reason that XPK and Froggen no longer play in Europe. So
we're gonna let's
it
do
would be
one
people
more.
like him.
This is a lot of fun. Let's do one more round to end the show. Emily, pick 2 buckets.
I'll go with current LEC
Uh-huh.
and past LCS.
Okay, current LEC. Current LEC is you have that is your team.
Oh, can you say it? Sorry, I can't
It's
see it.
Origin. Oh yeah, that's right. You
Okay,
can't see.
all right.
It's Origin is the team. And what did you say was the second bucket?
Past LCS.
Past LCS. Let's go. Let's see this. By the way, this is a Super Mario mug, and it's like really worse for wear because I've had it for several years. Don't put these in the dishwasher, by the way. This is what happens. It's a heat-sensing mug, too. It was really cool back in the day. Not anymore. You got 2019 Team Liquid.
Oh,
2019 Team Liquid versus Origin of 2020.
that's pretty good.
Wow. That's actually, so this is an interesting matchup. The thing I really like, and I think the thing that Team Liquid currently is kind of missing is Xmithy in the jungle. Like, I know a lot of people have a lot of things to say about his mechanics, but I just think what he brings to a team, even if he gets taken advantage of early game, is like incredibly valuable. This is thus far like the best iteration of Team Liquid that we have. And then current Origin is a team that I think for lack of a better way to put it, like I think there is a better way to put it because I think there are a lot of differences between the way that Origin play and the way that 2019 TL played. However, I do think that both of them are kind of slightly slower early teams compared to a lot of other teams, especially in Europe. And in that matchup, I do think that Xmithy, even if they lost like the first 2 games in a best of 5 or something, would be able to figure out Xerxes and take advantage of him. I don't know if you noticed, I keep over-focusing on jungle matchups in these. I also think that there's an interesting thing with Alfari and Impact in the top lane, because I think Alfari is, in his current iteration, the best he's ever been. And I think he can play both weak side and strong side. I just think he's like an incredible player. I also value upset skill very highly. I think Nuke Duck is kind of inconsistent for me. But I think TL as a whole, the way that they liked to play with this team, the way they set up things around mid control that Jensen had, even though I'm not going to go ahead and say that Jensen and Xmithy had the best mid jungle synergy. I think that Jensen had improved his communication with his junglers enough that they were really able to make a lot from his mid pressure. They were able to try to run 1-3-1 at times. It wasn't always, their execution wasn't always successful, but I think ideally what they wanted to do was that. This would be a close matchup. I think it would go to 5 games. I'm giving the edge to TL because I think current Origin still hasn't worked out all of the kinks. I think they know how they want to play, but I also think that they can get taken advantage of, especially if they really eschew being proactive early. Which we've seen. Like, we've seen them trying to be more proactive early, especially towards the end of the split. But yeah, that's my take.
And Core JJ is much better than Destiny.
Yeah, that's a given.
And according to Embrier in the chat, Xmithy is 1,000% smarter than Xerxes. So we have a lot of people really giving us.
I know people are going to look at the Core Destiny matchup, which I think is like self-explanatory, but I think the Xmithy Xerxes matchup, that's why I mentioned it first, because that's what it would come down to for me.
And the poll was Origin winning, actually, at 67% versus TL 2019. Yeah, very interesting indeed. I like Jay Season, who says both teams scale into infinity, therefore no winner.
The first 10 minutes, you're just sitting there checking your watch and like, do something!
Do something, please! Jacob, pick 2 teams.
All right, I'm gonna pick. Tyler
will go last.
I'm gonna pick current LEC.
Okay.
LEC playoff contenders and LCS of the past.
Okay, LCS of the past. So 2020 LEC, we got. And by the way, once they've been selected, they are removed from the pile. So just letting you know, we got this one here, and your current LEC team is Rogue. There you go, Rogue.
Okay.
Your team, and they will be facing.
I like what I may get here.
They will face. Wow, 2013 Summer C9.
Ooh.
I was hoping someone would get that team. Yeah.
Okay. I like it.
Who wins?
So the interesting thing about this C9 team is I think a lot of people forget. Pioneer is not the right word, but they certainly pushed Western League of Legends as particularly in North America, pushed it forward in a lot of different ways. They played a very different play style that was not really seen in Western competition as much. That's why they were so dominant. Obviously, in 2013, they went from playing in Challenger to winning LCS in the span of 4 months as they played in a qualifying tournament between Split 1 and Split 2 in 2013. I think, and again, game knowledge here, Rogue has better game knowledge now than 2013 C9 does. League of Legends has evolved. People have figured it out better. But the one thing you can always credit in 2013 and 2014 C9 is that they were always really off the wall. You think about in 2014, High running and hiding in those bushes in Zed, right? Like the stop the backs moment where Meteos backdoors with Nocturne as they chase down Team Coast to stop the backs from them so he can backdoor. This team was wild, really wild. And Najavan's talking about High. High was also at his peak probably in 2013. The meta at the time was very supportive mid laners, Soraka, etc. He is also really good though on Fizz and Zed. Like, you got to give him his credit, right, on the Assassins. If you gave 2013 2013 C9, the game knowledge that 2020 Rogue have, and you have Elimination's notebook and draft, 2013 C9 would win. That is my argument.
Ooh,
Yep,
I like it.
I agree. I think high is the big factor. I think Rogue
High and
is
lemon, man. High and lemon.
I think you have, if you like how you give them the game knowledge and you let them play. I think a lot of people forget that High before his wrist injuries was actually one of the best.
And then he had his lung injury too in 2014.
Najah fan says High's mechanics were actually quite good before his surgery.
Remember his lung collapsed right before All Stars in 2014, and they had to use Link from CLG as their mid laner in All Stars tournament, which is now what MSI is for context for those unfamiliar. But
I would take C9. I would take it's the high elimination factor. They were a talented, wacky stuff, but had a really, really good in-game leader. And Rogue is a very talented team that looks very sloppy in the mid game, and sometimes you wanted them to have that leader, right? If you could put High on this Rogue team and give them a really good shot caller, Rogue could be a top team in the world. But they have all the talent. They just don't have a lot of the brains sometimes. So I would take C9 just because I believe in their shot calling and just their all-around creativity.
Well, the chat seems to think the brains are there for Rogue as they lead the poll. 78% said that Rogue would win, 22% for C9. Let's end with Tyler. Tyler, pick 2 buckets. You're last.
Give me NA again. I want 2 NA teams.
2 NA teams. Okay, so where are they? Here's my past LCS champs. There's only one left.
Crossing my fingers for 2015
There's
CLG.
only one left. It's actually 2016.
No, not
CLG.
that one.
There you go.
Aha.
CLG is your past. There's only one left in here anyway.
This is the post-double lift CLG, by the way. This is the
2020
roster.
LCS playoffs. We got... Who do we have here? We got the Century Robbers. We have 100 Thieves.
Oh.
Ooh.
I think this is an easy one, don't you think?
And
this is a pretty easy one.
the CLG roster at the time was Zion Spartan, Smithy,
Huni.
that was
Huni.
Huni because they had made the
Stixay.
shift, right? Huni, Stixay, and Aframu.
Yeah.
That was the roster.
This is an easy choice for me. Give me 2016 CLG all day, every day. I honestly think CLG 2016 is one of the best. They're one of the best NA teams of all time. That team, chemistry-wise, was off the charts. People forget how good they were at MSI. They made the finals. I know you can talk about lightning the bottle, but Stixay probably had the most impressive performance by a North American player ever at an international stage. Stixay during that tournament was unbelievable. Just go back and watch his games during the 2016 MSI. He's never gone close to that before. Like since then, it's been 5 years later. He's never gotten even probably to 80% or even 75% of what he was at that MSI. But if we're taking like that MSI Worlds team, because people forget that CLG beat Rocks Tigers at Worlds 2016. They beat them. They outsmarted Rocks Tigers. The only reason CLG didn't go to the quarterfinals and make deeper runs because they lost Alba Snox Luna. They lost to it. They lost to the wild card
I
team.
forgot about that.
It is still not as bad as Alliance and Kaboom, but it's a close second for sure.
I think people really, and CLG smashed around the G2 team. People forget that CLG smashed G2, and they beat the Rocks Tigers. The only reason they didn't make playoffs in Worlds was because of Albus Nox Luna losing them twice, which is still a mystery to this day. And I think CLG 2016 doesn't get the respect they deserve because of that, because they did have that really small peak of MSI, Summer, then kind of dropping out Worlds where they lost Albus Nox Luna. But that team was incredibly good. The roaming from Hui was on point. He really was a player who did stuff before we've seen it kind of become the norm nowadays. Like what Niski is doing now for C9, Hui was doing back in 2016. I really, really, really like that 2016 CLG team. And then you look at 2020 100 Thieves, which is very dependent around Someday. And Zion Spartan, while he wasn't the best mechanical laner, just like CLG themselves, they knew how to play around teams that were one-dimensional. And 100 Thieves right now seem like a one team relying on Someday. So I think CLG would have this. If you get the game knowledge, if we have a 2016 CLG with the 2020 game knowledge and they're at that level of like talent, I would pick 2016 CLG any day. They're a more cohesive, better team.
This has been a lot of fun. Another edition of Bucket List. We're gonna do this every once in a while. It's a ton of fun interacting with all of you in chat. You seem to enjoy it as well, so we're going to keep it going. Rift Rewind ends here. The playoffs continue. We will be monitoring that and talking every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Myself, Tyler, Emily, Jacob, we will all be with you talking competitive League of Legends and all the big stories. If you missed anything, watch the VOD. This was Evil Geniuses, by the way. Goodbye. Have a great day. I thought this was my smartest one. We never got to it, though.